Good evening and welcome to Newsmaker Live with me, Kendall Burton. We're joined this evening by the Prime Minister's Press Secretary, Mrs. Jidia Japie-Emmanuel. Thank you very much for being with us. I know there are a lot of more exciting places that you could be tonight, including watching Top Chef.
Of course, I'll be
there
after.
A lot of other people.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for coming. Are you a big fan of reality TV and cooking shows and the like?
Not quite, but I'm excited about Top Chef because of Nina. I think she has brought something wonderful to all of this. We can connect with it finally. It is not about a distant land and people that we do not know doing things, but she's out there representing St. Lucia, and she brings so much of us to this show that I think every single St. Lucian can connect with it. Can recognize with it, including her dishes as well. And so I think the whole of St. Lucia is excited, at least about Top Chef.
Does the government have any plans to officially recognize her achievement or accomplishment?
I know that there are plans through the Ministry of Tourism. I am not at liberty to unveil, of course, because you would know that currently they would be in their own discussions to see how we could recognize her. I know that she has even offered to use her platform so that she can market St. Lucia, even outside of any official interaction with the government of St. Lucia. She has done her part as a citizen. She continues to display St. Lucia. She speaks very highly of her country, and so we could say that we have in her an ambassador, a citizen that is out there representing and selling her country as much as she can, whether it is through her earrings, her dishes, even the way she speaks. So you could just see she's all St. Lucian and she's out there making her country proud.
We were remarking earlier that the event tonight is not even a St. Lucia government initiative.
Yes, it's led by the people. As far as I'm aware, this is an initiative. It is an idea that came from one of the members of the SLAP group on Facebook, Lydia Cox. She just threw this out there, and she said, wouldn't it be a nice idea if someone can sponsor a big screen at the Derrick Walcott Square so that St. Lucians can come in and view live the grand finale. And it just picked up from there. I mean, other persons came on board. The Ministry of Tourism, of course, was contacted because if you're looking at an event of that magnitude, then there would have to be technical and financial support as well. So this was driven by the people, and the government of St. Lucia is basically providing the support. And so it is amazing to see what can happen when people put their heads together, when people get excited about something or somebody, and they see the wisdom in bringing everybody together in a collective space so that we could celebrate our country.
Now, while we've been talking about all the celebrating of Nina and her accomplishments, there's also been some negative, well, for lack of a better word, press associated with the whole thing. And it brings to question the subject of national pride, you know, and whether there's enough of it and what we can do to instill more of it in our people. Is that something that is being considered, or is the government more concerned, or are we generally more concerned with more pressing economic and other issues, you know, to think of things of that nature?
You know, you can't separate the people from the economy, and you can't separate governance from everyday living, because you're basically there to serve, and everything you do, the people must be at the center of it. And so while we are concerned with the economic issues, we're concerned with the level of unemployment, and we need to get certain things going so that our country can begin to, you know, rise, we must recognize what is happening within our society. You can it's only from the mood of the people you can determine how you move forward. And sometimes, just as the Prime Minister indicated in his New Year address, the people can really inspire you to move. The people can really inspire to do things differently. And so I think I would say that we're doing the two hand in hand. The pulse of the people, what the people are excited about, you respond to the people because you're there to serve the people. From day one, St. Lucians, they have been excited. I know a lot of people are saying, well, there are other St. Lucians as well who are doing great things and we do not recognize them. To those who say that, I would say now is the opportunity. If you recognize that there is somebody out there who's doing something great, you lift them up. You know, it is okay to say you're doing a wonderful job. It is okay to recognize their efforts and to praise them for their efforts. And so we need to continue to work together as a unit. And Nina said it in her last Facebook message that there are individuals who have done a lot, and they continue to do a lot. And so she appreciates the support that she's getting from St. Lucia, and she's also advocating that we do more to recognize other St. Lucians who are doing their best and continue to make us proud.
Speaking of recognizing St. Lucians for their accomplishments and achievements, the last show that we had, one of the questions that we got off Facebook and Twitter touched on just that, in terms of the establishment of a museum or some other structure to celebrate those accomplishments and individuals. Is anything happening in that regard?
The Prime Minister is very passionate about that, and I would go back prior to the 2006 general elections where he lost. Dr. Anthony began discussions with the Republic of China, and they were working on building a new home for St. Lucian artists. I do not know the exact details into what form it would be, whether it would be a museum, whether it would be another cultural center or a theater complex, but I know that it was one of the priority areas for the St. Lucia Labour Party government back then. When we went to the Republic of China, Taiwan, Prime Minister Anthony did engage President Ma and indicated to him that this remains a priority for him. It is something that he's very passionate about. And he did indicate that he would love to see us begin to move in that direction. I can confirm that we had a team, perhaps they're still on island, from the Republic of China, Taiwan. They have been engaging individuals in the Ministry of the Creative Industries and the Cultural Center so that we can have a discussion on what type of structure would be best, what design would be best. But I can say that the lands have already been identified, and so the government of St. Lucia will move in the direction of creating a home for the creative industries, for our artists and so on. There's something that Honorable Derek Walcott is very passionate about, and he speaks about it a lot. And I remember when Prime Minister spoke about it in Taiwan, he did indicate that it is something that he would want to do not simply for St. Lucians, but to also recognize the tremendous work that Honorable Derek Walcott has done in arts, and to recognize and appreciate his contribution to St. Lucia as well.
Still on the subject of recognizing our heroes, what can you tell us about the erection of the statue in honor of Sir John?
Oh, that is something wonderful, and the fact that it will be happening at our 35th anniversary of independence indicate that it is something that is important to the government of St. Lucia as well. I know a lot of individuals were saying it should have been done a long time ago, but when you look at what is happening now with his daughter and the contribution that she's making in her own way, and you look at 35 years as a wonderful milestone, I think everything is falling into place, and it is basically happening in time. I just want to encourage all St. Lucians to come out on that day to witness it, because while I was not there on that day when St. Lucia became independent and Sir John held up that declaration, I think what will happen on Independence Day is basically going to bring us back into that moment and really take us to that place and allow us to experience 35 years later what it felt like for so many other St. Lucians who were there at that moment when he was able to lift up that constitution, because I believe you've seen photographs of the statue, and in his hand he is holding the constitution of St. Lucia. So I think we are celebrating a lot. But 35 years of independence, while we celebrate us as a nation, the fact that the bus will be unveiled on that day as well is significant, because it would recognize him officially as the father of independence, and would say that as a people we appreciate the contribution that he made.
Okay. Now you touched on the Prime Minister's independence New Year's address.
Yes.
One of the issues that was raised again, on using the social media, is the issue of the frequency of the Prime Minister's addresses to the nation. There's a feeling that the Prime Minister is not as accessible, as open, as communicative.
I don't think accessible is the correct word, because our Prime Minister is very accessible. There are individuals who believe that he should do a little bit more by way of responses and communication and so on. But I can tell you that I do not know that there is a single interview on a subject matter that the Prime Minister has denied. And the individuals who are involved in the media can tell you, once a request is put through to have a discussion with the Prime Minister to intervene on matters of the day, then that is something that is very easy. Our Prime Minister as well participates in a number of public functions where he's called to speak on certain matters. It may not happen in the timing that some people would wish. He may not use the language that some people desire, but I know that the Prime Minister is very accessible, and the Prime Minister has absolutely no reservations in communicating with the people. In fact, I believe it is something that he enjoys. But the Prime Minister has his own style, and so while individuals would perhaps choose to have an address to the nation where you speak in one way, and you basically speaking to people, our Prime Minister has had a number of town hall meetings where he speaks with the people, where he's able to respond to their concerns. I mean, he's been in Miku South, he's been in Babuno, and so maybe some of us need to adjust to the new style, where the Prime Minister goes directly to the people, where he perhaps would not rely as heavily on the mainstream media and so on. The Prime Minister uses Facebook to speak to people and to respond to queries and questions. So let's just say that the mode has changed. He does things differently, and perhaps some people may have a difficulty with that because they no longer can control the Prime Minister's message and how it goes out. And perhaps this is the issue at hand. But I think our Prime Minister is extremely accessible. He does the interviews, he has had press conferences, he does the town hall meetings, which I believe is one of the more powerful ways of communicating with the people.
But there's still a feeling that, first of all, that perhaps he discriminates in terms of which media persons he interacts with or which media houses he uses. He's not appeared on RSL since his re-election, even on your own program. What accounts for that?
The Prime Minister, I remember the Prime Minister doing a radio telephone interview on 90 Minutes on RSL. I know that for sure. The Prime Minister has been on RCI. The Prime Minister, I mean, I can count. He has been interviewed by Choice, he's been interviewed by DBS, he's been interviewed by HTS. I do not know that there is a single media house that the Prime Minister discriminates against. And if there is an individual who believes that he or she is being discriminated against, or the media house is being discriminated against, perhaps they should speak up. And then would identify a specific individual and what exactly the issue is. But I disagree with that because, well, I manage the Prime Minister's press matters, and I know, and he is very accessible. He has done interviews with DBS, HTS, I mean, you name it. I don't think that's an issue
But he did have a regular program before. Is there any possibility of him returning to that in combination with the town hall meetings?
It would be a wonderful thing, Kendall, but we have been thinking about it. And he has a regular program right now on Wednesdays in Viewfort. It's called In Touch. On this program, the Prime Minister comes and he speaks of current issues, matters both on the constituency and the national level, and people are able to call in to ask the questions. And so this is why I said earlier that it may be a matter of style, and that things are being done differently, because we were used to the Prime Minister's conversation with the nation, which was an extremely good thing. But it was one-way communication, a pre-recorded message where the Prime Minister comes and airs his views on matters. Right now, risky as it may be, he has gone the way of doing a live talk show where he's in the studio and people can call in. I can tell you, not all of the calls are pleasant, not all of the comments are pleasant, but he understands as Prime Minister that he must be accessible, he must know what people are thinking, allow them to call in, and he's so much more patient than I am when we do this program, I can tell you. So he is communicating, and perhaps we can do more. There is always room for improvement, and we have been thinking of doing some other things, some other programs, so that we could reach more people.
Speaking of reaching more people, are you satisfied that you are making sufficient use of entities like Radio St. Lucia, NTN, and GIS?
I do a weekly program on RSL, which is Inside Government. And I'd be very sorry if you missed yesterday's program with Senior Counsel Anthony Astafan. It was not a program to miss. And on Inside Government, what we do is that we bring on the program parliamentarians, members of government, senior personnel within the government as well, to speak to issues related to the government, so we can inform people, clarify matters that may be out there, and so on. And this is a weekly program on Tuesdays. And then with the Prime Minister, I do the program on Wednesdays. We are thinking of some other programs as well. It's difficult because we're operating with limited resources, both human resource and financial resources as well. But the GIS NTN, you would be aware, went through some changes. And so I think they're basically putting things back together. We have seen some great changes at GIS NTN, and we're expecting some new programs to be unfolded, and we're hoping that we can have more interactive sessions where we can reach people. But I must say that as press secretary, I have not restricted myself to the mainstream media. I have been consistent on the social media. We use BlackBerry Messenger, WhatsApp, Twitter, Facebook to reach people. We post a photograph so people can see what the Prime Minister is doing, where he is. We engage with people, exchange and comments and so on. And so I think mainstream media is important, but the social media allows for two-way communication, where if you post, you get response from the people, whether it is positive or negative. All responses, of course, would be important, as it would guide you as to how you do things. You would know what appeal to people, what you should do to reach more people, and so on. So there is always room. We can always do more. I think we can use not just NTN, GIS, and Radio St. Lucia, but the other media houses to get the government's message across, to ensure that we're reaching more people, we interact with people. But sometimes, when we are not speaking, we are listening. And so I just want St. Lucians to know that every single comment that is made on every single talk show is noted, and we may not act on what is said, but the fact is that we are listening, we are hearing, and it would guide the government in terms of its future actions, future responses, and so on. So while we may not be the ones leading the programs, while we may not be the ones on the programs, we're still listening to the voices and listening to what the opinions are and what the feelings are about the government decisions.
One of your decisions was to merge NTN and RSL. Any developments in that regard? I'm
not sure. To be quite honest, I know that we went through a period where staff were redeployed. And the minister spoke to that. In fact, before anything happened, Senator Dr. Fletcher made some pronouncements and indicated what the new vision would be. There is new leadership at GIS NTN. We have seen that staff now operate from different ministries, and so individuals who all worked in one single unit at GIS NTN before, it's different now, where they are at the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ministry of Youth and Sports, and what we're hoping to see out of that is that each ministry would have a little bit more visibility. The message would come across. You would know what the policy directions are, what exactly they're working on at certain points in time. But in terms of the actual progress as to where we are with RSL and NTN operating as one, I can't speak directly to that at this time.
When it comes to the redeployment, has been working well, especially from the point of view of the Ministry of Health and Infrastructure, the steady flow of information coming from those ministries. I'm not quite sure what's happening with the others.
Well, I think, to be quite fair, I think that we are beginning to see positive changes. Obviously, once there are changes, you need to allow for periods where people would settle down and begin to learn the environment. It's basically a learning process, because I remember when I came in to the office of the Prime Minister as a press secretary, it really took some time for me to feel my way through and to find my way, because I'd never operated in government before. And I'm coming from a campaign setting where the urgency of time is understood by everybody around you. I must say that it's a bit different in the government service, because processes and procedures must be followed, and you must channel things through the right individuals and all of that. So I am very sure that the individuals coming from GIS NTN, while there may have been a more direct link and a more direct flow, now things would have to be different in the ministries in terms of getting the right channels. So I think basically everyone would have settled in. already, and we would now be able to see the work coming out of these ministries. I think Youth and Sports is doing extremely well, and they have been able to highlight the activities of the ministry. And it's important to say the ministry because it's not simply the minister.
Right.
There is work happening in the ministries that may not necessarily be aligned to the minister or to the person who heads that ministry. In the Office of the Prime Minister, for example, there are so many units aligned to the Office of the Prime Minister, like parastatal monitoring, and you also have the ambassador to CARICOM and so on. Now, with an officer assigned to the Office of the Prime Minister, you find more of their work coming to the fore as opposed to there being a focus simply on the Prime Minister and his activities. So that is one positive that we have seen from the deployment, the redeployment of those officers.
If you can go back to the Prime Minister's New Year's message,
Sure.
A significant portion of it was focused on the economic situation and challenges facing the country. What can you say to the government's own belt-tightening measures? How are they leading by example?
This is something that came up a lot during the negotiation process, and it is too recent and it was too charged for us to forget what that process was like. And many individuals thought that the government should lead by example and demonstrate that we're making the changes that are necessary to deal with the fiscal deficit. In the Prime Minister's address, he made a statement to indicate that additional taxes would not be the answer to cure St. Lucia's economic woes. He also indicated that the avenues that were available in the past, which was borrowing, is no longer available, and so we have to look towards cutting down our expenses. If you go back to the 2013-2014 budget statement by the Prime Minister, you will realize that our capital expenditure was cut. The reason the capital expenditure was cut and not the recurrent expenditure is because once you begin to deal and to speak about belt tightening and retrenchment, it would mean that you have to deal with your largest areas of expenditure, which would be wages and salaries, and then you have goods and services. And so it would tell you that these are situations where you have to tread extremely carefully because you do not want to, while you're looking at the macroeconomic situation, you do not want to act in a manner that will create undue hardship and more stress for your citizens. And so the government's response was to reduce on the capital budget. The Prime Minister gave an update as to where we are in terms of dealing with the deficit, and we have been able to recognize a modest decline. And so we can say we're doing something positively. But much more must be done, and this is why the Prime Minister will be engaging the public, will be engaging the private sector and the trade unions so that we can have a conversation, so that outside of an environment where basically you're negotiating for salaries, outside of the environment where the government is called on to respond to a pressing need, you find neutral ground and you speak to your partners, giving them information, showing them, for example, the performance of the economy, what the options are, learning from them what their views are, what suggestions they have as to how we move forward, so that we may find common ground to move forward on the matter of the economy. It's a difficult one. It is one that causes the Prime Minister a lot of discomfort. I mean, he worries about the economy like anybody would worry about their child, I can tell you, because if we do not deal with the situation that we are faced with right now, there would be severe consequences for St. Lucia in the future. And so in terms of belt tightening, there is really not much more that the government of St. Lucia can do without dealing with the issues related to our recurrent expenditure, which would be wages and salaries and goods and services. We have dealt with the capital end of it by cutting, and then now you see in the situation where you have emergencies like the trough and so on, there would have to be capital expenditure that you did not cater for because you need to rebuild your country. And so we basically need to work together on this one to see how we can hold each other's hands, all sectors of the economy, to work towards that common purpose.
There's a feeling that the cabinet is still too large, too many consultants employed by the government.
What are consultants? Because a lot of persons have been saying too many consultants. What I think we need to recognize and we need to begin to level off is who are the consultants and what are their roles, what roles that they play, because even in difficult economic times, the country has to, the business of the country has to go on. And so right now, for example, we are faced with some serious challenges in our health sector. We have a new facility in the new National Hospital complex coming on board. You also have the St. Jude Hospital, where the government of St. Lucia has been granted a soft loan through the Republic of China, Taiwan to complete, and the Prime Minister has given the guarantee that it will be completed this year. What do you do as a government? Do you simply say that things are difficult and so we will not go the route of looking for expertise in terms of determining the best practices, how we can do things differently and continue with business as usual? In the end, it will be more costly for the people of this country. And so while you're faced with difficult economic times, what it calls for is not simply a seizure on all government expenditure, but it calls for prudent leadership, where you would demonstrate that you're making wise decisions, not simply for now, but for the future. And it is the same for any household. If you are an individual right now in your house, and things are a bit difficult in terms of your financial standing, when you look to cut, when you look to readjust, you are still taking into consideration your future, your own development. And so what you're going to try to cut, or the decisions you're trying to make, you want to ensure that these decisions would not make you worse off 10 years down the line. So it is not just the immediate. We still have to think about the future of this country.
Now, speaking of fiscal prudence, is the Prime Minister being fiscally prudent when he hires Anthony Astafan to pursue a civil case in the situation?
I'm glad you asked this question, because Senior Counsel Astafan has been very open in this matter, and perhaps he is the first counsel that has been engaged by any government who has gone out and made public what his charges, what his fees, and so it demonstrates a certain level of openness on his part. The government of St. Lucia made a promise to the electorate. In 2011, when we came to the people, we said, if you vote for me, I will do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if you go to the back of the manifesto, you'll see a list of things that the government said we would do. Among all of those things, we said we would create jobs, we said that we would restore our infrastructure, and so on. Among all of this, one of the promises that featured prominently, if you go back to the news records and so on, you will see the Prime Minister, you will hear opposition parliamentarians lamenting their dissatisfaction with the accountability for the Taiwanese funds. And so we promised that we were going to investigate it. As per the decision to engage Senior Counsel Astafan, he indicated that a deposit of $400,000 was charged. He has not received it. Yesterday on a program Inside Government with me, he said the Prime Minister has said to me that I am not yet able to be paid because the country has no money. Is that not a Prime Minister who is exercising fiscal prudence? He understands that he has a responsibility to the people, and he understands that it is important that public officials, prime ministers, parliamentarians, and so on, are held accountable, and that they operate with due care, honesty, and integrity when they're dealing with public funds. But he also understands that while he's pursuing that goal, while he's pursuing the agenda to ensure that anybody, not just UWP parliamentarians, but anybody at all who misuse public funds are held accountable, he understands that it must be pursued alongside all of the other responsibilities of the state. And it is not a situation where the government of St. Lucia took $400,000 and gave to somebody. He's doing it in exchange for a service. And so we must recognize that fiscal prudence must be alongside your own goal and your agenda, what you want out of it. And I've said before, we know the cost of pursuing this matter. What we have not yet discussed is the cost of pretending that everything is okay, the cost of not ensuring that public officers operated above board, the cost of not ensuring that we account for the over $40 million that needs to be accounted for. And so he's giving a service to the country, and he's being paid for the service. It's not a matter of him being paid to do nothing.
That aside, aren't we not using public funds now to pursue cases against private citizens? We're due for a break. When we come back, you can answer that question.
Sure.
You're watching Newsmaker Live with me, Kendall Burton, on DBS. Our guest this evening, the Press Secretary to the Prime Minister, Mrs. J.J. Shapir Emmanuel. We'll be right back.
I'm not hearing you.